Creative transitions are not just tricks, they're tools. In this video, I'm breaking down 4 different types of creative transition that actually work in real DJ sets to move between tracks, genres, and even completely different tempos. Once you understand these, creative mixing stops feeling risky and starts feeling fun and expressive. Let's get into it. Okay, now all 4 examples that I'm going to be breaking down in this video are taken from my latest course called Creative Transitions. The 4 types of transitions that I'm going to show you in this video are acapella mashups, which is where you take the acapella or the vocal from one track and mix it with the instrumental of another. Then we have the genre switch up, which is where we start by playing one style of music and seamlessly mix into a completely different genre, but make it sound effortless. After that, I'm going to show you a scratching transition, where I'm going to use some simple scratching techniques to transition between 2 hip-hop tracks. And then we have a wide BPM transition. This is where we have 2 tracks that are completely different genres. I'm going to be mixing from a house track, which is 128 BPM, into a soul track, which is around 100. And when that is done correctly, it can work really well. Creative transitions don't necessarily have to be complex. They just have to have the right thinking behind them and the right techniques. And in this video, you're going to learn how to do all of it. Now, for the acapella mashup example, I have an acapella here by Brandy on the left deck, and the track is called I Wanna Be Down.
I would like to get to know if I could be.
This is an old classic 90s R&B acapella, and I'm actually using the official studio acapella because it just sounds way better than using Serato stems. But if you don't have the acapella for any track that you would like to perform an acapella mashup with, that's fine, just use Serato stems. Now on the right deck, I've got a UK garage track by Grant Nelson called Together, and this track is over 30 years old. Now, as I'm sure you've already noticed, this track is a completely different BPM to the R&B track. But the reason this works is historically, UK garage has had a ton of R&B influences, and 90s R&B acapellas usually go really, really well with a UK garage track. Now, the first thing that we need to do is make sure that these tracks are running at the same tempo. Now, this controller right here is the DDJ Rev 7 from Pioneer DJ. And right here, we have the tempo slider. Now, if I put the tempo slider all the way to the fastest setting, you can see inside Serato that we're only at 92.9 BPM. And that's not enough because we need this track to match the tempo of this one, which is 123.8. So let's put the tempo slider back to the middle. And this button right here, which is the tempo range, pressing this button will allow us to go to a higher speed when we put the tempo slider at the top. So when I press the tempo range button, you'll see inside Serato that the tempo range for the left deck is changing. So right now it's on plus and minus 50. So now take a look at what happens when I move this tempo slider all the way to the top. It now takes us to 129 BPM, which is plenty. So if I now move this tempo slider down until we get to 123.8, the tempo of the acapella now matches the instrumental. Something else that is super important when you're performing an acapella mashup is to make sure that both tracks are in the same key as each other. Because this acapella is sung by Brandy,
I would like to get to know if I could be.
It has to match the key of the track that you're mixing it with. If you were performing an acapella mashup with a rap acapella, then the key is not as important. But if we're going to be mixing singing like we are here, then it has to match the key of the track on this deck. Now, if you take a look inside Serato, you can see right here on the left deck, it says 9A. This is the key of the track, and this is using the Camelot wheel code. You can also see the track on the right deck is in the key of 8A. The Camelot wheel is a super handy code for DJs that helps with mixing in key. This chart right here is simply a rebranded circle of fifths, and it works in sections. If you take a look at 8A right here, you can mix 8A with another track that is 8A, or you can go 1 up or 1 down. So since my a cappella is in the key of 9A and my instrumental is in the key of 8A, these two tracks are going to work in key perfectly. Another example would be if you have a track in the key of 1A, this will mix perfectly with a track that's in the key of 12A, 2A, or 1B. As long as you only move one place in the Camelot wheel, then it should work in key nicely. Mixing in key does go a little bit more in depth, but trust me, that is all you need to know at this stage. I have a hot cue set right at the beginning of the a cappella.
I would like to get to know if I could be.
And I also have a hot cue set right at the beginning of the breakdown of the UK Garage track. I'm also going to use a feature here on the Rev 7 called Silent Cue. So let's turn that on. And what this does is it mutes the track. So if I play the track and put the volume all the way up, you can hear that there's no track coming through. But the moment I press one of the hot cues, it will unmute the track and play from that hot cue. And then if I press silent cue again, it mutes the track and it will start playing the moment I press a hot cue. This is actually one of my favorite features on the DDJ Rev 7 and I use it all the time. Now I'm going to start the mix by doing some baby scratches to bring in the a cappella, and then I'm going to trigger the breakdown on the UK Garage track. I'm also going to add a little bit of reverb and play around with the filter on the a cappella just to stop it sounding stale. Let's take a listen.
I would like to get to know if I could be the kind of girl that you could be down for. Cause when I look at you, I feel something tell me that you're the kind of guy that I should make a move on. And if I don't let you know, then I won't be for real. I could be wrong, but I feel like something could be going on. And the more I see, the more that it becomes so true. There ain't no other for me, it's only you. I wanna be down with what you're going through. I wanna be down. I wanna be down with you. Down with you. I wanna be down.
Now, one of the most common mistakes I see when it comes to a cappella mashups is quite often DJs will take two tracks that are similar BPM, similar key, and just assume that they're going to work. Sometimes you can get lucky and this can work, but the best thing to do is try out your mixes, try out many different combinations of a cappella and instrumental, and find two tracks that really do go together. Not just musically, but stylistically as well. One of the most exciting things about a cappella mashups is how many are out there. Every time I sit down and try and come up with a new a cappella mashup, it reminds me of how many are out there. There's such a huge number of combos that are just waiting to be found. You can pick a cappellas and instrumentals from the same genre, or you can choose an a cappella from a completely different genre to the instrumental, just like this one here. But my advice would be to dig for your own a cappella mashups, because really, that is the fun part. Now, this video is teaching you the categories, but my Creative Transitions course is the full collection. It contains every single one of my best and most creative transitions, the ones that work in real DJ sets, shown properly and then broken down step by step so that you can recreate them, understand them, and then build your own versions. If you'd like to check out the full course, then just click the first link in the description. Next up, we're going to be looking at a genre switch up. And for this example, I'm going to be going from an R&B track by Faith Evans called Love Like This into a liquid drum and bass track by Lensman called Open Page. Now, even though drum and bass is a much higher tempo than R&B, because it's a liquid drum and bass track, it's actually quite chilled and it goes really well with an R&B a cappella, which is running at half the tempo. So this is the R&B track that we're going to be using.
I never knew there was a...
Now I've already changed the key of this track by putting it up one semitone, as you can see in Serato, so that it is running at the key of 3A. And that means it's perfectly matched with the drum and bass track, which is running at 2A. So these tracks are going to be nicely in key with each other. Now, a genre switch up is where you mix from one genre into a completely different genre, but you do it as musically, as smoothly, and as creatively as possible. And when done right, this can completely transform the vibe in a room. Quite often when you're DJing, things will happen in the venue and you have to be able to respond to them. You might be playing an R&B section of your set and it's just not landing right. The crowd just wants something way more up-tempo, and a transition like this will cater to that situation perfectly. If this mix was from an R&B track into a jump-up drum and bass track, this really wouldn't work as well. The reason that this one works so well is the drum and bass track is super chill. It's got beautiful chords, it's got beautiful piano, and I think it goes really well with the R&B acapella. So now let's talk through exactly how to perform this transition. So I'm actually going to start off this transition from the very beginning of the Faith Evans track. And we're running at 100 BPM. And we actually need to bring this tempo down to about 88 BPM, which is when I will start mixing in the drums of the drum and bass track. And then the moment the drum and bass track drops, that is when the Faith Evans verse kicks in. I'm also going to use a little bit of serato stems for this transition. So let's play this Faith Evans track. And I'm going to take out the drums and then echo out the instrumental. And then that leaves only the acapella playing. If you've used stems inside your DJ software already, then you'll know how much of a game changer it is. It opens up so many creative possibilities when it comes to creative DJing. And what I'm using right here is called the Serato Stems pad mode. So over in Serato, I'm going to change the view by clicking here to the stems view. And on the screen, you can see the stems controls inside Serato. You can actually assign one of your pad modes to mirror the stems controls on the Serato screen. So the top row of pads will turn the individual stems off, and the bottom row of pads will trigger the stems effects, the ones that I was just using there. This button echoes out the drums and leaves the vocal, the melody, and the bass playing. This button here will echo out the instrumental and leave only the vocals playing. Let me show you how to get the stems pad mode on your controller with Serato. So let's go to the settings, and then underneath DJ preferences, right here, you've got the option to replace primary hardware pad mode with stems. And you can see that I ticked this box and I've chosen sampler. So now if I change both pad modes on my controller to sampler, I can now control the stems for both decks directly from my controller. If you use Serato and you have a controller, I highly recommend setting this up, because using stems via the stems pad mode on your controller is by far the best way of using stems with Serato. It really does make DJing way more fun and can help you be way more creative. So now let's go over the beginning of this transition one more time. I have to let the track play, and I'm going to slightly bring down the tempo. Echo out the drums, echo out the instrumental, and then we've got just the vocal playing. Now, as soon as Faith Evans' vocal comes in, that's when I'm going to start mixing in the drums from the drum and bass track. And I'm going to have the low pass filter down very low, and then slowly bring that up. And then the track will drop. And then as soon as the drum and bass track drops, that's when the Faith Evans verse kicks in, and that's when the transition really gets going. This is a great way of completely switching up the vibe in the middle of your set. And it's also a great way of you showing off your own musical taste, your creative skills, and your own individual stamp as a DJ. Let's take a listen.
I never knew there was a love like this before. Never had someone to show me a love
So as you can hear, we just mixed from an R&B track into drum and bass smoothly and creatively. I do love transitions like this, but it is important to make sure that you don't do them too often during your set. I might do between 1 and 4 of these transitions during a real set, but it just depends on what's happening in the venue and whether or not the crowd in front of you need the direction of the music to change at multiple points throughout the night. They're an amazing way of showing people your skills, but also your own style and your own taste in music. Okay, next up, I'm going to show you a scratching transition. Now, on the right deck, I've got the instrumental version of a track by Glorilla called Yeah Glow. And I'm going to be scratching in the intro to a massive hip hop track called Fiend by Travis Scott. So if I go over to the hot cue pad mode on the DDJ Rev 7, I'm going to be using mostly 2 hot cues. The hot cues that I've set on the first pad and the second pad. Now that continuous tone is absolutely perfect for using the crossfader to create your own rhythmical cuts. And that's actually called the transformer scratch, which I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on shortly. You can also see inside Serato that I have changed the key of the Glorilla track down 1 semitone so that it's now running in the key of 2A, and that matches the key of Fiend, which is also 2A. Because we're going to be scratching and cutting up a musical piece of the track, which is this synth line, it's important that that is in the same key as the instrumental that we're scratching over. Now, when it comes to scratching, the crossfader is simply used as an on and off switch. So as the crossfader is all the way to the right side, that means we can't hear the left deck. But the moment I move the fader over, you can hear the track on the left deck. And there's a really important setting that you need to be aware of inside your DJ software, and that is the crossfader curve. We need that set to the sharpest possible setting so that we only have to move the crossfader the smallest amount before the track turns on. So over in Serato, let's go to the settings. And then if we go to the mixer tab, you can see right here, you've got the crossfader curve. Now on my DDJ Rev 7, I actually have a dedicated crossfader curve knob on the front of the controller. But if you've got a smaller controller like the DDJ Flex 4 or the DDJ Groove 6, you will actually be able to adjust the crossfader curve right here. And all you need to do is make sure it's turned all the way to the right so that it's on the fastest setting. Once you've done that, you will be able to perform the same cuts to the synth line on this track as I'm going to be doing for this transition. So now let's talk about what the transformer scratch is and how to perform it. So the transformer scratch simply involves tapping the fader to turn it on and off rhythmically. And the way you do this is you rest your thumb against the fader. And the reason we rest it here is to make sure that the fader is kept constantly closed. Now, I'm not applying a crazy amount of pressure to this fader. I'm just resting my thumb there. And then what we do is we take our middle finger and our index finger and we use those to very gently tap the fader like this. And after every tap, my thumb is naturally pushing that fader closed again. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to trigger the first and the second hot cue whilst rhythmically turning the fader on and off like this. If that's a little bit fast at first, no problem. You can do half the tempo like this. Once you feel comfortable doing it at that tempo, I do recommend trying to introduce a little bit of speed and changing the rhythm like this. Now, it is also possible to perform this with the volume fader instead. Some people prefer using the volume fader for the transformer scratch over the crossfader, and this is totally up to you. I much prefer using the crossfader because I feel you can get much more intricate sounds with those fader cuts. But if you wanted to do it with the volume control, it would be the same principle, but rather than tapping the fader on and off like this, you're turning the fader up and down like this, quickly and rhythmically. James Hype uses this technique a lot, as does DJ EZ. So try out both and see which one works for you. Now for this transition, I'm also going to be using a little bit of the low pass filter here. And as I trigger and cut up that synth line, I'm going to gradually bring the low pass filter up to help build tension before dropping into the full theme track. I should also mention that on the fourth hot cue, I've got that set to when the track really kicks in. Take a listen. So this is the most recognizable part of that track, and it's a great way to end a transition like this. This scratch routine will build tension before dropping into the main part of the track. So now let's take a listen to the transition. So you could see there that I kept it relatively simple. You could most definitely perform quicker fader cuts and perform some more intricate scratches in between the fader cuts and moving the low pass filter up. Whatever level you're at with scratching, just modify the transition so that you can perform it cleanly. Personally, I would always rather watch a DJ perform a more simple transition that is executed perfectly than watch somebody try and perform something super intricate but they can't quite pull it off. Performing it cleanly wins every time. Next up, we're going to be talking about wide BPM transitions, and this one is a little bit different. So on the right deck, I've got a house track by Pauser called Too Cool to Be Careless. Take a listen. So that's running at 128 BPM, and we're going to mix down in tempo to around 100, and we're actually going to be mixing in to the soul and R&B record that massively influenced that house track. So it's actually got exactly the same bass line. It is a completely different key, but we'll get into how to fix that in a moment. Now, this house track doesn't sample this soul record, but it is massively influenced by it. So this is a great example of how to mix between two tracks that are completely different BPMs and completely different genres, but do it as cleanly, as tastefully, and as musically as possible. Now, I'm actually going to begin the transition from this part of the house track. And then in a moment, I want to set a 16 beat loop inside Serato. And you can do that by pressing this 16 icon here. Now this loop right here, I want to actually save it inside Serato, which is super easy to do. All you need to do is press one of these two loop icons here when you have an active loop set, like we do here. So let's click this, and now you can see that that loop that I currently have set is now saved into that bank. If you want to activate that loop that you saved, all you need to do is click right here, and that will turn that loop on or off. Now the house track is actually running in the key of 11A, and the key of the soul record is 8A. So these are completely different. And to match the keys, I actually need to increase the key of the house track by 3 semitones to match the key of the track on the left deck. But what I'm actually going to do, let's go back to the original key. What I'm going to do is when that loop starts to play, I'm going to increase the key by 1 semitone incrementally before mixing into the soul record. Doing it this way ensures that it isn't too jarring and that it's done cleanly and smoothly. Now, because this is a wide BPM transition, we have to make sure that both tracks are synced with each other. To do so, all you need to do is press the sync button right here, or you can press sync inside Serato. The tempo range is also very important. So we currently have the tempo range set to plus and minus 50. If I press the tempo range button here, you'll see that the tempo range changes inside Serato. And if your controller does not have a tempo range button like this one here, no problem. You can change the tempo range by clicking this icon here for the left deck and this icon for the right deck. Any wide BPM transition will need the tempo range to be at plus and minus 50. So that's what we're going to be using here. So now let's take a listen to this wide BPM transition.
Count on. What you need is a lot to count on. What you need is a lot to count on. What you need is a lot to count on.
Going down in BPM, like this transition here, is actually a little unusual. And the reason I wanted to show you a wide BPM transition going down in tempo is because nobody else does. And when it's done right, with the right framing, the right structure, and the right selection of tracks, it can work really well. Creative DJs do not just rely on one style of transition. They pick the right transition for the right moment. Creativity comes from having various options that will allow you to transition between different tracks, different styles, and different BPMs in a variety of ways. Now, this video has shown you 4 of the categories for creative mixing, but my full creative transitions course is my entire collection of the most creative, musical, and skillful transitions that I've ever made. It's a deep dive into everything that we've talked about here, and if you want to check it out, then just click the first link in the description. Now, if you want to check out some more tutorials from me showing you how to mix more creatively, then I recommend you check out this playlist right here, which is packed with videos that are going to help you see DJing in a completely new way.